Jaegers are soldiers who are able to carry out reconnaissance and fight in enemy-controlled territory. Small units are the tactic of choice for stealthy maneuvering by air, water, and land.
All right, y'all, welcome back to Coming Arms channel. Okay, so we recently checked out a video about the Lithuanian Special Police. Now, a lot of y'all are recommending the Lithuanian Special Forces units known as the Aitvaras. Now, I was looking for some videos, and one of y'all actually sent me a pretty recent one. So as of recording, it was uploaded about 2 weeks ago. So this is very, very recent. It looks like it's covers the unit pretty well as far as giving pretty decent in-depth knowledge. So this is from the Baltic Defense Review YouTube channel. It's about 8 minutes long, but it looks like it gives us a pretty solid background for this unit. And again, I know a lot of y'all were hyping them up, so I want to check it out. I mean, checking out Special Police is always cool. It's very nuanced, but checking out the Special Forces, again, is definitely going to be more suited to kind of my knowledge base, more suited for like the military speak and kind of comparing it with other military units that we checked out. But yeah, let's see what kind of background we can get. I mean, it's okay if we're not necessarily going into like, you know, how much they get paid like we did with the ARAS video, but I am interested to see what kind of information we can hear about these guys, especially what kind of makes them a little more nuanced than other Special Forces units. And before we get into the video, I do want to do a shout out to a Kickstarter by my longtime friend and also fellow YouTuber, Luke, over at Original Human. So he has a Kickstarter for a new health drink called Morale. Now, him being a former Royal Marines commando, I trust his opinion a lot more on how to properly fuel the body, because again, he's been there, he has done that, he has the life experience. So with the Morale, it is a new health drink made out of adaptogenic mushrooms. Now, looking into the research, I know a lot of people will think it's kind of very inconclusive, and it is pretty early in the research. However, you have to think with adaptogens such as, you know, these mushrooms, things like ginseng, they have been around for, you know, centuries, even millennia. They have been around for a long time. People swear by them to give their body that focus, that energy, that stamina, especially that sort of stability, that homeostasis. A lot of people swear by them. So although the studies might still be pretty early, pretty young, it's definitely something that a lot of people will rely on already. So it only makes sense to kind of put this into a sort of health energy drink to kind of, again, give that body that homeostasis, that energy, that focus. And again, me, you know, as a warrant officer, everybody always sees a warrant officer with his, you know, mug of coffee, which again, I drink a lot of coffee, probably too much coffee, I would say. And then I also dabble in energy drinks. And yeah, with those, I mean, I usually add some stuff to it. Even with energy drinks, I get a little bit of energy and then I kind of crash out. So it's not necessarily like the healthiest. It's not the most reliable, and definitely doesn't really help with like the homeostasis when you do have that kind of crash after all. So yeah, definitely something that I am super eager and willing to back on this one. So again, he has that life experience. He has been there. He has done that. And I trust his opinion 100%. So I definitely trust him on this journey and this Kickstarter. So I'll put a link down in the video description. Definitely go and support him out. Take a look. If you want to do some research yourself. And compared to the last Kickstarter that I sponsored on this channel, I do know the owner and I trust him 100%. So you do have that. And yeah, if you backed that last one, I apologize, because I'm still trying to reach out and figure out what's going on with it. But yeah, definitely go and check out that link in the video description. Now let's get on to the video.
Continuing to go through various military units, let's now take a look at Lithuania's Special Operations Forces. Just like most special military operations units around the world, there's a lot of secrecy around how they operate, what they do, and who they are.
So already, like off the bat, like, I mean, Ranger Green is pretty solid choice when it comes to a lot of different environments. Specifically, you know, talking about Lithuania, it makes a lot of sense. But generally speaking, we only really see like the flat colors when it comes to like police units. So like military not using like a form of camouflage is kind of an interesting choice. So I wonder if that already kind of goes to show what kind of skill sets or missions these guys are used for.
Unless there is official information out there to give us a general idea about this special unit.
Ooh, okay. Those guys look significantly more high speed. I mean, G36 is cool, but
operations forces collectively go by the name Aitvaras. If we take the word on its own, Aitvaras can translate to kite, but it is also the name of a mythological animal.
It looks like we're getting some older footage mixed with some newer footage. I mean, just kind of like looking at this looks, I mean, this almost doesn't look like a special forces unit. I know we're talking about Lithuania, you know, obviously like their budget isn't necessarily going to be as high as like the Green Beret or Delta or something like that. But I mean, you're talking about pretty standard like plate carrier G36 with EOTech and magnifier. And then it looks like potentially Gen 3 night vision, but like an older mount, kind of pretty standard helmets. They don't have dual tube night vision, but we saw like kind of early on here, this looked a little more high speed. So hopefully we get some kind of more modern footage mixed in with the older footage.
One source says that it's a bird that looks like a white or black rooster with a fiery tail like a meteor. The creature has also been
Sounds like a
described
phoenix.
as a bird with the appearance of a dragon outdoors. Generally speaking, the main tasks of Lithuanian special forces are near identical to equivalent units in other countries: special reconnaissance, direct action, and military assistance.
Okay.
They prepare for high-risk and high-value-added operations aimed at achieving strategic and operational results in the political, military, information, and economic domains.
Nice.
These forces can be used in the territory of Lithuania in case of terrorist attacks, when law enforcement agencies do not have necessary capabilities to respond to threats.
See, that's always interesting because, like, we see that with a lot of European countries because they'll have their own specialized police that look very capable of like anti-terrorism operations, but then they say that the military can also be used like that. Now, we've seen it's like the SAS or SBS. We've seen them kind of used more locally. We've seen it with other special forces like the Dutch DSI. I mean, you kind of have like the MARSOF like overlapping with the DSI. But again, it's very different from like the US. You're not necessarily going to see like the Navy SEALs reacting in like, locally, because obviously you have like FBR HRT, you have, the BORTAC dudes. You have a lot of people, but there's not necessarily that overlap. Even with like the National Guard, there's not really that overlap operating locally, just because you have different authorities. You have, Title 10 versus, what you're talking about, like the civilian authorities as well. So there's definitely a lot of separation, a lot more separation from the U.S. agencies as opposed to like foreign ones that I've noticed.
Do not have necessary capabilities to respond to threats. So how did Lithuania's Special Operations Forces evolve into what they are
and
today?
cold as fuck.
Well, there's a long history of units
International?
that could be considered Special Operations Forces in Lithuania. But when it comes to Aitvaras, this unit is only a little over 20 years old. According to the Lithuania Tribune, the Special Operations Forces of the Lithuanian Armed Forces were officially established on December 17th, 2001.
That as a result
the same
of
article, which has
9/11?
an interview with the first commander of Aitvaras, Colonel Saulis Guzevičius, has this to say about its founding.
Nice. Yeah,
in
those guys are fucking high
1995,
speed.
under then commander of the Voluntary National Defense Service, Lieutenant Colonel Aitvaras Potsius, we started to create the Special Operations Forces. It was completely classified. Guzevičius goes on to say that special units were established through the late 1990s in Vilnius, Kaunas, and Klaipėda. In 2000.
Generally speaking, you'll see a lot of these units or a lot of things just made up around like the 90s, especially when you talk about, countries that were previously part of the Soviet Union. Obviously, you're going to see all the military units kind of forming in the 90s after the Soviet Union dissolved. But 2001, maybe it's very ignorant as an American to assume that it was a result of 9/11. I mean, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense because they're way over there and they're not necessarily responding to the same kind of things. But I wonder if it's going to kind of go into the predication for why they kind of made them officially after all these other special operations units in the 90s.
One after the September terrorist attack in the United States, Guzevičius says that he was instructed to merge the separate special units.
Okay,
And so a few months
not that
after
ignorant.
those life-changing attacks, Aitvaras was officially established on December 2001.
That is a badass
While
logo
Lithuanian
there.
special forces are known collectively as Aitvaras, the forces divide into several distinct subunits. There is the Special Purpose Service,
very cool
or
logos.
YPT, Vytautas the Great Jaeger Battalion, or VDJB, the Combat Diver
doesn't necessarily
Service, or
roll off the
KMT,
tongue.
and Training and Combat Support Center, MKPC. The main tasks of the Special Purpose Service is counterterrorism, hostage management, and special operations on land, water, and air.
Okay.
Jaegers are soldiers who are able to carry out reconnaissance and fight in enemy-controlled territory. Small units are the tactic of choice for stealthy maneuvering by air, water, and land, conducting special operations where the enemy least expects them.
I'm trying to relate these to
The
like
main
American
tasks of
units,
the
but
Combat Diver Service are special operations.
it's not going to be
in
a great
water,
comparison.
boarding operations, coastal reconnaissance, infiltration ashore, special underwater operations, and support during hostage situations.
That's going to seem more akin to like the
And
Navy
finally,
SEAls
the
or
Training and
MARSOC.
Combat Support Center organizes and conducts recruitment and training in support of all Special Operations Forces units. It also performs the combat support function, analyzes identified lessons, and implements innovations.
So in the Marines, we had the Expeditionary Operations Training Group, which I know kind of ended up turning into something else or just dissolving. But the Expeditionary Operations Training Group, the EOTG, those guys basically trained the Marine Expeditionary units or gave them like certifications, I think, as well. But you had like courses like rappelling and fast roping. So a lot of those deploying units will go there. I think like specifically Marine Recon will also train specifically with those guys, but they do a lot of different courses. Something that I was able to train under them with was more specific to rappelling and fast roping. So it's kind of like a training unit that supports special operations, not necessarily special forces, you know, when you're talking about MARSOC directly, or maybe the greater special forces like SOCOM, but they did kind of have that training role. So that's just something that I can kind of compare it to. It is really nice having a training unit. One, because they have the funding, they have the facilities, they have all the resources, but they also have the best training by far as far as like the specialized training. And then it's just nice to have all of that in one specific place, so everybody can just kind of, you know, go through all the different courses.
Highlighted in an LRT article, Aitvaras is one of the most secretive units in the Lithuanian military. Still, the media outlet was able to have an interview with Eugenijus Dauskertas, a retired soldier and former member of Aitvaras.
Nice.
Dauskertas says that it takes about 2 years to train special operations soldiers. At that point, the candidates are no longer young recruits, but people in their mid-20s. You already have a little bit of life experience, he told LRT, adding, you start to recognize patterns of behavior and so on.
I imagine they want
As
some
a side
experience
note here,
before
when
they
it comes
get
to the
into
selection for special operations forces, participation in the selection is only voluntary. In August 2022, call for applications says that only soldiers with the necessary qualities are selected from the candidates, who are then given special knowledge and skills in the process of further training. Selection
A volunteer
for
organization
special operations forces takes place occasionally and
makes
it's
all the
announced
difference.
online, and we're guessing probably circulated among units where suitable candidates are serving. The selection process is organized for persons who have obtained basic military training after continuous mandatory initial military service or service in the National Defense Volunteer Force, and who have graduated from the JKVM, which is training for junior officer commanders.
Oh, snap, okay.
Candidates must have a valid health certificate and can register for the selection event by phone, email, or online form. Going back to the
phone, email, or on. Okay. I mean, yeah, I guess that makes sense. It's pretty similar. Honestly, like with the U.S. military, they have a lot of recruiting efforts. Not only do you see all the posters and stuff all around, I mean, right when you get on base, there's usually like a poster recruiting for like special forces or something, but they'll have them all over. They'll send out emails for people who have like certain criteria, if they have like certain MOSs or rank or like even like the PT score. They'll find people and they'll kind of populate a list and they'll blast out recruitment emails like that. So I get them all the time. It's usually like once a month you'll get something. If it's not necessarily for like a specific like operator role, it'll be like, you know, for a support function for a different unit. So the recruiting efforts are definitely there on this side. When it comes to something like this, again, being like a voluntary unit, that makes all the difference. Not only having like the volunteers, but also having that selection. So you have people who want to be there, you know, theoretically speaking, they want to be there, they want that mission, they want to be a part of that kind of that role and that job. But then again, you have that selection to weed people out because, you know, although they want to be there, they just might not be cut out. They might not have the right experience. They might not be mature enough. They might not, of course, be physically fit enough or even like tactically proficient. There's a lot of things that go into it. So having that selection, again, like on top of it being voluntary, will make all the difference just with that alone.
LRT article and interview. On paper, the force is supposed to work from 8 to 5, but of course, reality is somewhat different. Dauskertas says, after training, you kind of get back on track. You start to be at home a bit, until training starts again and you disappear again, and you and your family start to see each other less and less as time goes by. A lot of guys sacrificed and still sacrifice their time, their family's well-being to have a special operations force under the Lithuanian flag.
Yeah, that's a big thing that keeps people away.
Give a lot. Children grow up without fathers, but this is the sacrifice that makes the Lithuanian army so trusted now.
Yeah, it's a tough sacrifice for sure.
He told LRT that he decided to quit when his work was becoming detrimental to his family. The article, which published in January 2023,
that's really what precludes
says
me
that he and his
from
wife have a 6-year-old
making that
daughter
step.
and a 4-month-old son, and he felt that he was missing out on being a father. Aitvaras participated in counterinsurgency operations in Afghanistan between 2002 and 2004. From 2005 to 2006, these special forces were on duty as part of the NATO Rapid Response Force.
Okay.
After 2007, these soldiers participated in the NATO-led International Security Assistance Force mission in southern Afghanistan.
You know, it kind of reminds me of like the Royal Marines Commandos, where like they're kind of going back to their roots now, the commando roots, kind of focusing on being like that special forces, operating in small teams, being more of like that raid kind of element, having that strategic role especially. So when you have like special forces units operating in the ISAF in like Afghanistan, they end up looking more like a conventional kind of infantry units. Of course, it's still going to be smaller teams, different tactics by far, different roles. But again, when you're talking about like kind of like the strategic function, you're not going to be having those same missions. Of course, you know, you'll have the raids for sure, but having that strategic mission to, you know, have very strategic fires or open up corridors for strategic aircraft like whatever F-35s or something like that, or taking down something like an anti-aircraft gun or surface-to-air missiles, having those like commando functions as well or special forces functions as well. There's a lot of that kind of goes out of practice just because obviously that's not what the war entails necessarily. You know, there might be like one example here and there, but it's kind of interesting to see the special forces implemented in a role like that, and then kind of see everybody, even like the U.S. military, the conventional infantry. We had to kind of like refocus away from that counterinsurgency to more of what infantry and modern combat would be looking like the peer-to-peer warfare.
2017,
very
then
different.
Commander of United States Special Operations General Raymond A.
That's
Thomas
sick.
had this to say about Lithuania's special forces, having worked with them in Afghanistan.
One, I've had the great pleasure to work with Lithuanian Special Operations Forces on several occasions. I worked with them in Afghanistan when I was the commander of NATO SOF. Just a tremendous organization. We're very proud of the evolution of Lithuanian SOF, an organization that was formed less than 10 years ago that right now is one of our most capable partners.
Nice.
Both forward, you know, in the
That's
combat
big.
zone where we work with them, and then
Yeah,
certainly
10 years. I mean,
this challenging mission set.
That's
What
not a
else
lot of
can
time
be
at all.
said? When it comes to Lithuanian soldiers, they're obviously among the best of the best. And it's great to know that they can serve competently with other special forces around the world and draw the same level of respect.
Didn't that
Do you
look
know much
shitty,
about
that
the secretive
downwash.
group before watching this video? Let us know by leaving a comment.
Again, like, I know they're very secretive, kind of like they mentioned in this, as with most kind of like higher tier special forces. But yeah, we didn't see a whole lot of like very modern footage. I mean, going back to this Afghanistan stuff, sure. But we had like some of the clips, like this kind of stuff. I wonder if this is kind of what they look like now as far as like, you know, their armaments kind of switching more to like the AR style rifles with suppressors and whatnot, as opposed to, you know, kind of like the G36s without the suppressors, just standard like EOTechs and whatnot, which I mean, you know, it's a solid setup. They have lasers, they have night vision, so they, you know, they have the capabilities for sure. But it is kind of interesting to see how they modernize. It's also just interesting to see what the country is putting some funding into as far as modernizing special forces, because you'll kind of be able to tell, you know, where a country is at economically speaking, when you kind of look at the special forces and see, you know, how much funding they can actually get, how many capabilities they get, and also like how trusted they are to do certain operations. So they didn't really talk a whole lot about like the real world operations that these guys took part in. But if you guys have any examples, and you guys have a lot of interesting examples, specifically with the ARAS, when we were looking at that video, a lot of the comments you guys were talking about how, you know, you're just chilling, all of a sudden like a van showed up and these ARAS operators came out of nowhere. So it is really interesting to kind of hear stuff like that. I'm not sure if these guys have been employed locally so much, and again, they haven't been around too long, but if you guys have any examples of like real world operations that these guys took part in recently, I would love to hear it, because I love kind of hearing that and seeing what kind of capabilities they implemented in like these real world missions. Because I imagine, you know, they have the maritime stuff, they have probably airborne capabilities as well. But seeing how they use that and when is kind of interesting as well. Okay, definitely a cool video. So again, I will be doing a lot of these reactions, kind of whatever you guys are recommending, I'll try and check out, especially, you know, how we checked out the ARAS. A lot of y'all are recommending this unit specifically. So if there's a lot of recommendations for one specific unit or even a specific video, then I'll prioritize that on my list. But I do have a list. It's broken down. If you guys don't know, I've kind of talked about this, but not very recently. It's broken down by country, and then I'll kind of prioritize it in that list. And I'll kind of prioritize all the videos in general. So if it's recommended a lot, that's how it gets kind of bumped up in the list. Generally, Ukraine stuff is kind of just getting bumped up more because a lot of y'all are interested in kind of checking that out. And I'm also interested in checking it out because that's kind of like modern warfare. And we're able to kind of stay up to date on how Russia and Ukraine are implementing certain things as opposed to like drones or anti-drone warfare. So it's very interesting to kind of check up on that just to kind of understand where modern combat is at. But again, it is really interesting to kind of look at all these different militaries, all these different units, see their capabilities, see what they're getting up to, and kind of see how they compare with everything else that we've checked out. So I do have a lot of videos recommended. So if you guys have anything to recommend, definitely send it my way. Let me know. And again, I'll prioritize it based off of how many of y'all are actually recommended a certain unit or even just like a certain video specifically. So that's kind of like my method to the madness. It's like a Google Doc, and I don't even know how many pages it is at this point. I kind of go through and trim it every now and again because a lot of the videos are like years old, like a couple years old. So I'll just get rid of it because, you know, I kind of missed my chance to kind of react to that when it was topical, I guess, or, you know, just recent. So yeah, that's kind of how it works. Sometimes I try and react to some of the stuff that's more recent because sometimes I upload a video and it was, you know, reaction to a video that was uploaded a couple months ago. So it's kind of old news, but I do try and catch up and stay up to date. And I will kind of shift the upload schedule if something was very highly requested. But yeah, that's just kind of like, again, my method to the madness. But hopefully you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys think about this special operations units. And again, if there's any modern examples of how these guys were implemented, definitely let me know so I can check it out. If you have any articles to recommend, I will check that out as well. But yeah, Lithuanian Special Forces, I mean, I've heard a lot of good things about Lithuanian troops in general, so I imagine their special forces are going to be pretty solid. But again, it's a very young unit, so compared to other special operations units, they might not necessarily have the same level of experience, but it really comes down to, again, like the capabilities, the funding, but the mindset as well, how rigorous the selection is. So hopefully we can also find some insight. I'm going to do my own little research to kind of see what the selection process look like so we can kind of see how they actually weed out everybody and what that attrition rate is. But hopefully you guys enjoyed. That is it for this video. I will see y'all in the next one.